The National Center on Intensive Intervention, or NCII, has helped many states and districts plan how to implement data-based individualization, or DBI. There are lots of DBI implementation stories from all over the United States captured in our Voices from the Field series. For leaders planning or starting DBI implementation, planning for sustainability upfront can help to streamline implementation efforts. At some point in the implementation process, schools and districts need to own the work and deliver ongoing supports, including supports for new teachers within existing budgets and staff time. In New York City, Jason Borges and Meghan Duffy from the New York City Public Schools Central Office have found several successful strategies for DBI implementation that have helped make DBI self-sustaining. This three-part series shares their implementation story with a focus on how they set up their efforts to be self-sustaining over time. In Part 1, Jason shares how they were inspired to begin this work and how they got it started. In Part 2, Jason and Meghan share the professional learning strategies they used to make DBI self-sustaining at the school level as they scaled up implementation. Finally, in Part 3, Jason and Meghan share the benefits of their implementation approach and what their major takeaways are for future efforts. Let's jump in with Part 1, the beginning.
What was on our deputy chancellor's mind was a lot around pre-referral process, addressing disproportionality in special education, and educating folks more on foundational skills, and getting teachers at a far-reaching way to become educated and get the right PL to be able to deliver those kinds of interventions to hopefully reduce the number of students in special education. It's still around 1 out of 5 students have an IEP in a New York City school system. I went to a presentation, and then there was this professor there by the name of Devin Kearns from the University of Connecticut. Decided I was just going to call Devin one day and just be like, you know what, there's something going on here. He was talking a lot about supporting students that really needed intensive intervention. So when I met with Devin, he was doing work at the time in Rhode Island with the National Center on Intensive Intervention around data-based individualization. So he pulled out this decision-making chart around DBI that they were currently using with teams at the school district in Rhode Island. And so I looked at him and I said, I want this. Like, this is something that we would really benefit from, giving a set of processes that will guide systematically teachers to be able to deliver intensive intervention.
So Jason knew he wanted to work with Devin to introduce DBI to the New York City school system, but he also knew it would be a learning process for many educators. To be successful, he knew he would need to build capacity in a more systematic way so that DBI support and expertise wasn't limited to just him and Devin. That led them to plans to pilot DBI first.
The thinking that often happens in central New York City Department of Ed or larger departments of ed is that everybody wants things to be far reaching and quick. I knew obviously that this was going to have different kinds of not only technical challenges, but adaptive challenges that we were going to have to face. So I proposed in that first year that we take 2 schools, and with those 2 schools, we do a full year pilot that they were going to commit to. So I put together a memorandum of understanding, and that Devin was going to have a small launch with them.
After selecting the 2 pilot schools, one in Brooklyn and one in the Bronx, Jason and Devin delivered not only initial trainings, but ongoing support throughout the first pilot year. This wasn't just good for teachers in those 2 schools. For Jason, it was also a learning opportunity about the technical and adaptive challenges he anticipated schools might have during implementation.
We went every 5 weeks to meet with their DBI teams at both schools. And what I did was I started taking notes on the technical and adaptive pieces. So technical pieces like, what programs do you have? Where are you going to need PL support? What's going on with assessment? How much knowledge do the teachers have around explicit instruction?
Jason and his colleagues learned a lot about the school-level implementation of DBI that year and began planning next steps. Up next, Jason shares how they worked to scale up DBI to additional pilot schools and build out consistent professional learning supports to help facilitate implementation. After providing training and weekly visits to the 2 schools piloting the DBI process for a year, Jason's team felt they had learned a lot about how to implement DBI well and were ready to expand the program. But they wanted participation to still be voluntary. So Jason began reaching out to more local leaders about partnering, with the promise that they would provide professional learning or PL supports.
We were able to tap into each of our borough centers. And so I met with all the directors of special education and their executive directors in each of those boroughs, discussed what happened in year one, discussed a memorandum of understanding and saying, we would love to partner with you to get one school that we're willing to provide PL support for, the training and programs, even before they enter in the process so that they are equipped if they don't have something, if they don't have the kind of secondary intervention programs, that they're going to get trained in progress monitoring, and that the borough leads that would be supporting with us can learn from these experiences.
It was the promise of these professional learning supports that was appealing to many schools. In that second year, the pilot grew from the original 2 schools to 9 schools across the city. By the third year, they had 12 pilot schools. As the pilot expanded, so did the professional learning supports they were offering. They started by establishing leadership days where school leaders could get support and training on how to support DBI in their buildings using an improvement science approach.
What we found is that that's going to be the promising approach to have with district and school-based admin, is taking on more of an improvement science or implementation science approach with them to think through all of the different types of infrastructures that need to take place within a school to support them from where they are. So taking from a known to an unknown, together, and being able to iteratively reflect on those kinds of drivers that we have in the schools. Through that implementation, you see this expansion and this coming together where you might lose a staff member, or this might happen, or all those kinds of realities happen. But then how do you get back to that stage that you were in where it was really moving?
Megan from the New York City Public Schools Central Office joined the team in their second pilot year. She also sat down with school leaders to better understand their school context and how DBI aligned with the existing structures.
As we were going into schools, we were able to meet with admin and say, okay, like what does your model for literacy currently look like, right? What do you have? What do you feel like you don't have? And there were gaps, right? There's going to be things that they realize, wow, we don't have that. We don't have specific intervention programs, right? Or maybe the intervention programs we have aren't necessarily matched to the student population that we have or the specific students that we're bringing to the table.
Jason and Megan also had to think about who else could help support DBI implementation on a more day-to-day basis in each of the pilot schools and continue providing support past initial trainings.
I said, what would be great is to build out a coaching series to build capacity. So like a coaching series that we can have our borough leads be part of, universal literacy coaches, or designees at the site that could be DBI teacher leaders. They built out a really nice 2-day coaching series, full day, and it immersed everybody not only in the DBI process, but it immersed them into thinking about intervention supports, progress monitoring supports, looking at case studies together of students and working together to come up with plans, and then talking about coaching moves to support staff and school leaders.
Together, Jason and Megan were running DBI meetings at the pilot schools, modeling the process for administrators, coaches, and teachers.
As we were running those meetings, what we were trying to do was set up those schools to eventually run without having us there to guide the complete process, right? Because at the end of the day, if it's going to be sustainable, it can't just live with us, it has to live within that school building as well. And I would say within a majority of our schools, we really started to see who those kind of like high flyer folks on the team were. They were able to really be the leaders on that team and take those meetings and run them.
Eventually, the coaches also began providing supports to school leaders locally to help them understand the details of the DBI process and how they could support it at the school level.
Every 4 weeks, these 8 principals would come together and go to each school, and they would present a different kind of problem of practice. And we were able to have these kinds of substantive discussions around the technical pieces, what they could do to support, right? So if they're doing an observation, what is it that I'm looking for? Because as one said, this is not guided reading. Just saw the power in like how they were making all that explicit for the principals, right? To build their knowledge base to understand what it looks like, and they were starting to deepen their understanding.
By the fourth year of the pilot, with even more schools signing on to implement DBI, Jason and Megan had developed deep knowledge about the DBI process and what it looks like at the school level. But because their goal was to ensure DBI implementation was sustainable, they knew they'd need to continue to build knowledge about DBI throughout the school system. That's where the centrally funded IEP Teacher Initiative came in.
This is a group of teachers. They're identified by that specific school, and it's comprised of both elementary teachers and secondary teachers, and they're charged with providing interventions to specific small groups of students, and they receive professional development from our central offices. These teachers were really well versed. They had all the prerequisite knowledge. They had the understanding of the foundational elements of reading. They had the understanding of the elements of explicit instruction. They had the intervention programs. They had the assessments. So as we started to get into like year 4 of implementation with these teachers, we actually started to take all this information that we knew from DBI, all this expertise and knowledge that we've had from implementing it outside with these, at that point, 12 schools, and bring that information to these intervention teachers.
Megan's work with the centrally funded IEP teachers helped to build the capacity of teachers across New York City schools, not just in the pilot schools, to use the DBI process over time and see how it could be used with their students in need of intervention.
It was really quite powerful. We tried to mimic the meetings within the context of our professional learning sessions. They could come together with fellow educators that are doing the same work, present student case studies. Here's one student I'm working with, non-responsive. Let's talk about it together and collectively decide what's going to be your next step. And then we come back in a few months, we're going to come back and reflect on that process again, see where you're at. Let's look at your data. Let's look at your current plan. It was exciting to take it and really bring it into a portfolio of over 500 teachers outside of the current 12 schools that we were working with at that point.
With so many schools and teachers now implementing the DBI process, Jason and Megan have begun to think about how to ensure that new teachers in the district have the knowledge they need to ensure that DBI continues to be used successfully long-term, even after the original staff trained in DBI have left. Currently, Megan is teaching a course at Pace University in Manhattan to ensure that their teacher candidates learn about DBI before they graduate, as many of them are likely to be teaching in local New York City schools.
Feedback is just incredible, and that they're going to use it as the student's master's thesis, where they're going to have to do a case study of the student using the DBI process in the course, and they're going to have to write basically a thesis about it. And then another outgrowth of that is that Megan and I are having an opportunity to meet with the heads of special ed departments at both of their campuses, and they want to discuss how to improve their scope and sequence of their graduate curriculum. By the time they get to the intensive intervention course, they have some requisite knowledge and schema.
We knew all the prerequisite knowledge that teachers really needed to have in order to engage in this work. And these teachers have been great. You can see that these are teachers that once they move into specific, teaching positions, they're going to be able to do this work.
It's really exciting that it's getting into local pre-service coursework, but we're seeing it also as a way, whether those student teachers come into the New York City Department of Education or if they go elsewhere, they'll have those experiences to be able to draw from.
Up next, Jason and Megan share more about the long-term benefits they've seen from their DBI implementation model and some of their learnings along the way. As they worked with pilot schools and trained teachers over the years, Jason and Megan saw more than just the implementation of DBI. They saw real benefits to teachers and how they worked together.
I think some of the successes that we saw having a systematic process and almost building up some form of data literacy too with people, where through the progress monitoring, if they saw that the progress was going north, like they're immediately bought in, eager to talk about it. What really came out of it and what I saw was a really strong sense of collective teacher efficacy. They're problem solving together. And another outgrowth of that was surfacing in schools around shared curriculum and foundational skills from kindergarten to second grade. That was another big conversation that happened at the schools as a result of engaging with DBI.
Jason and Megan also learned more about school staff's receptivity to the DBI process.
Schools really took to it because they saw the collaborative process. They saw that the decision-making was really amongst the group and individuals at the table, and that the data just gave you a compass point. Do we have to increase explicit instruction? Do we have to provide more opportunities for fluency? How is this impacting comprehension? Now at those schools, they're starting to shift towards universal screening in kindergarten through second grade, really focusing more on foundational skills.
One of the biggest lessons learned through the process was that the coaching supports that Megan and Jason built into their professional learning helped ensure that school leaders and teachers could learn about DBI in practice over time, rather than in a one-off training session.
Doing this process and training teachers, you can train them in interventions, you can train them in assessments, you can train them in the foundational aspects of reading, that's fine. But if you don't have the coaching and you don't have the capacity to spread that coaching, the work's never going to take place, because you have to have someone there to help you through the process and learn the process. And I think that when you start spreading it large scale, that's when you get into the weeds of not seeing the overall improvement from it. We're in this for the children. We're doing this for students. We're trying to improve student outcomes. We want to actually see that improvement. So I think that we have teachers that would say to us, I used to only know what was going on with my students 3 times a year, because that's when I assessed my students. Once I started engaging in this process, I knew every single week what was going on with my student. And right then and there, if I knew something wasn't going right, I can make those instructional changes. Just without that coaching piece, you can't, the scaling, you can't go big. You have to keep it small and start having that systemic change over time.
Thank you to Jason and Megan for sharing their insights and experiences implementing DBI over the past several years in New York City. For more DBI implementation stories, check out other Voices from the Field profiles on the NCII website at intensiveintervention.org.